ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। नारायणं नमस्कृत्य नरं चैव नरोत्तमं देवीं सरस्वतीं व्यासं ततो जयम् उदीरयेत्। नष्टप्रायेषु भद्रेषु नित्यं भागवत सेवया भगवती उत्तमश्लोके भक्तिर्भवति नैष्ठिकी। कृष्णाय वासुदेवाय देवकीनन्दनाय च नन्दगोपकुमाराय गोविन्दाय नमो नमः। ॐ अज्ञानतिमिरान्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनच्छलाकया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूपः कदा मह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकम्। वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरोः श्रीयुतापदकमलं श्रीगुरून् वैष्णवांश्च श्रीरूपं सागरजातं सहगणा रघुनाथान्वितं तं सजीवं साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनासहितं कृष्णचैतन्यदेवं श्रीराधाकृष्णपादान् सहगणललिता श्रीविशाखान्वितांश्च। हे कृष्णकरुणा सिन्धु दीनबन्धु जगत्पते गोपेश गोपिकान्त राधाकान्त नमोस्तुते। तप्त कांचन गौरांगी राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये। पंचकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौरभक्तवृंद। हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे। नमः ओम विष्णुपादाय कृष्णपरिष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमती नमः ओम विष्णुपादाय कृष्णपरिष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमती भक्तिवेदांत स्वामी नामिने नमस्ते सारस्वती देवी गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष मुखं करोति वाचालं पङ्गुं लङ्घयते गिरिं यत्कृपा तमहं वन्दे श्रीगुरुं दीनतारिणं परमानन्दमाधवं श्रीचैतन्येश्वरम्। हरि ओम तत्सत्। Hare Krishna. I'd like to welcome all the devotees for our weekly discussion of the Srimad Bhagavad. We are today going to discuss the 10th chapter of the third canto of the Srimad Bhagavad. The third canto is predominantly the conversations between Maitreya Muni and Vidura, and we spent quite a lot of time discussing of the various pastimes which lead to this conversation. Yes. After the battle of Mahabharat, how at one point Vidura, feeling insulted, was asked by Duryodhan to leave the palace, and he walked out. He went out on a pilgrimage. Uddhav, after being instructed by the Lord, he went on pilgrimage towards Badrikashram, and the Lord, through his pastime of the Mausal Leela, wound up the Yaduvansh through a fratricidal war at Prabhasa Kshetra. And how there was this beautiful conversation between Uddhava and Lord Krishna in the presence of Maitreya Muni just before the Lord departed from this planet to go back to the supreme abode of Goloka Vrindavan. And how the Lord remembered Vidura and left a beautiful message for him. The Lord instructed transcendental knowledge to Uddhava, and Maitreya also heard it in great detail. Krishna wanted Uddhava to preserve that knowledge for all generations to come. And Uddhava actually still resides in this world. He has not departed from this world. Where does he reside? He resides actually in Vrindavan Dham, in a in a very special form, in a hidden form, in an unmanifested form, at Uddhava Kunda along the Govardhan hill. There's a specific place, and he eternally resides there in the form of a small grass or creeper, because that was the benediction he had asked for. And over the thousands of years, great souls, pure devotees, who have prayed to him and have requested for his grace, have actually received the darshan of Uddhav. It's very, very dear and confidential associate of the Lord. Very, very confidential. Outside Vrindavan, if anybody is most dear to Krishna, it is Uddhav. Uddhav is an exceptionally close associate, a very, very close friend, and also a cousin. Almost of the same age and almost having very similar bodily features like the Lord. Very, very special. So later, Uddhava and Vidura meet at a particular place, and then Vidura, actually at Prabhasa, and Vidura requests Uddhav to reveal whatever the Lord explained to him, but Uddhav deferred that revelation by requesting Vidura to approach Maitreya Muni, who was residing on the bank of the Ganges at Haridwar. And Viduraji accepted that recommendation, and he approached Maitreya Muni on the bank of the Ganges at Haridwar, and this beautiful conversation is happening. And within this beautiful conversation, in the response to the various questions by Vidura, Maitreya Rishi is actually explaining the histories of the universe, beginning from the histories of creation. And the conversation of creation has currently, in the chapter 10, reached to the point where Brahmaji, after having performed the necessary tapasya and having pleased the Lord and having received the darshan of the Lord, has been blessed with the power to create. And we discussed those beautiful conversations in the last few chapters of how Brahmaji, following very humbly the instructions of the Lord, actually received those blessings. So the journey continues in this chapter 10, and this chapter 10 is focused, the chapter is entitled Divisions of Creation. The chapter is not a very long chapter, some 30 odd verses. Again, it is a bit more technical as compared to philosophical. So we will go through it nonetheless, and try to learn from the wonderful example of Lord Brahma. The last time we discussed the beautiful prayers of Lord Brahma and how very humbly he prays to the Lord, not just for the power to create, but also for the blessing that in spite of that power, he never be deviated from the truth. That he never forget the instructions of the scriptures, and he never be misled by false ego to think that it is he who is great, or that all these powers that he has actually belongs to him. And actually that should be the prayer of each and every living entity. This is our main disease. Our main disease in this material world is when we become successful, when we have something extraordinary, either bodily beauty or birth in a rich aristocratic family, some God-given intelligence, we tend to be proud as if we are the creators of that particular opulence. Even a little bit of sensibility will make it very apparent to us that we have simply received it as a gift. We have practically no contribution in designing it or possessing it, isn't it? Yes. those out of us who have been blessed with a slightly better looks than the average human being, what really has been our contribution? Yeah. In the mother's womb, have we been designing and sitting with some, computer applications to try to nicely fine tune our features, make it look pretty? No. Karmana daiva netrena. All arrangement of the Lord through the agency of material nature, supervised by the Lord. So those who are serious on the spiritual path always want to be conscious of this reality. And this is the secret of always remaining unaffected and always remaining Krishna conscious. Always maintain a mood of humility by being cognizant of the reality that actually everything belongs to the Lord in this world. Everything. Not just everything outside us, not just this world, the planets, the sky, the clouds, the land, but even our very bodies, our strength, our beauty, our abilities, our intelligence, even our faith that we have for worshipping the Lord. Krishna says, I only give that faith. And Krishna has explained that so beautifully in the Bhagavad Gita. And when we properly reflect on it, we cannot but be overcome with gratitude and humility. That is why those who are actually advanced in spiritual consciousness, they are seen to be actually very humble. Why? Because once you understand the greatness of God, the natural consequence of understanding the greatness of God is to understand actually how insignificant we are in front of that unlimited great power. This is not some inferiority complex. This is genuine humility, understanding, yes, whatever I have, it's not to say that, an intelligent man has to say out of humility, I am stupid. No, that is not what we mean by humility. A beautiful person doesn't have to say, no, 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 I'm not beautiful, I'm ugly. That is not what we mean by humility or modesty. True humility means to recognize that I cannot take credit for what I have been blessed with. Ultimately, the Lord is the reservoir of all potencies, all abilities, and all wonderful attributes. Buddhir buddhimatam asmi tejas tejasvinam aham. Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, I am the intelligence of the intelligent. Even to deny the existence of God, those who write long, long books. One very famous contemporary evolutionist has written a book, The God Delusion. So he's worked very hard to try to convince himself and the world that there is no God. That the idea that God exists is a delusion. But even to write that, he has to use God's given intelligence. Of course, he's abusing the intelligence, but still, even to deny God, even to defy God, you have to use the abilities given by God. So one who actually recognizes how dependent, how integral everything is, how everything is ultimately a part and parcel of that supreme truth, that actually ultimately, in the broadest sense, nothing exists independent of him. Everything is part and parcel of him. Not to say that everything is him, but everything is part and parcel, is dependent. Sarvam idam maya protam sutre manigana eva. Everything is resting on the Lord. Those who become cognizant of this reality cannot but become grateful, cannot but become humble, cannot but become devoted. Bahunam jarmanam ante jnanaman mam prapadyate Vasudeva sarvam iti samahatma sudeva. Such a great soul is very rare. Who has come to that realization, Vasudeva sarvam iti. Ultimately, everything is Vasudeva. This doesn't mean that I am Vasudeva, you are Vasudeva, not in that sense. But everything is connected and contained within him and his energies. Nothing is beyond him. Nothing is independent of him. There is no reality beyond him. Even we, while we exist as a reality at one level, we are a relative reality. We are not an absolute reality. Because our existence depends on the existence of the supreme reality, the supremely independent reality, which is Sri Krishna. That is why Krishna is known as Swarat, fully independent. But we are all dependent realities. Even while we exist, even our existence is dependent on him and his energies. That is why Bahunam Janmanamante, when a person after many, many lifetimes actually understands things as they are, what Gita is speaking, what Bhagavata is speaking, Vasudeva Sarvamiti. Everything is within the Lord and connected to the Lord. That's why when Krishna spoke to Brahmaji in the previous chapter, very beautifully Krishna summarized. You would have understood spiritual knowledge perfectly when you see everything within me and I within everything. Yeah, we discussed this briefly the last time. Krishna has mentioned the same thing in the Gita as well. Yeah? This sounds contradictory, but on deeper reflection, one understands how both of these things are simultaneously true, and that is the greatness of Krishna. Because Krishna is not just a material entity limited by time and space. Krishna can be within the universe, and at the same time, the universe can be within him. Yes, that's what Krishna displayed to Mother Yashoda. Krishna was in Vrindavan, and Mother Yashoda saw Krishna eating mud. Actually, she didn't see. Balramji went and poked and complained. Oh, Maya Yashoda, Krishna is eating dirt, and she came running to see. Krishna was on the bank of the Yamuna at this place which later became famous as Brahmanda Ghat. And she asked Krishna, Krishna, are you eating dirt? Krishna said, no, I'm not eating. Open your mouth. No. So when she pushed him hard enough to open the mouth, when he opened, and Mother Yashoda peeped into the mouth, she saw something very amazing. Of course, she saw some mud also. So in that sense, Krishna was caught, but she saw something more. She saw the entire universe within Krishna's mouth. Namaste Studamne Sfuradipti Dhamne Tvadi Yodara Yatha Vishwasya Dhamne. Everything is existing within you. You are the supreme truth. She opened the whole universe. And then it was like a zoom, like a Google map. You zoom in, zoom in, zoom in. You start with the planet, then you zoom in, zoom in. So she saw the universe and zoom in. That was probably where the idea for this Google map came. Yeah. Zoom, zoom, zoom. Then she saw the earth. Zoom, zoom, zoom. India, zoom. Vrindavan, zoom. Bank of Yamuna. And finally, on the bank of the Yamuna, she saw herself and Krishna standing there live. She's seeing, but then she saw inside his mouth live the same thing happening. She was like shocked. And it didn't stop there. In that, she zoomed further. Within that Krishna's mouth, again the whole universe existed. And again zoom. And again the same thing happened. Again, iteratively. And after some time, her head started spinning. It was so difficult with material intelligence to fathom how all these things can actually be possible. So Krishna is amazing. It is not fully possible to fathom. That is the reality. And that is why even the greatest of great souls, whether it is Brahmaji or any of the others, I'm simply amazed at the Lord's inconceivable potencies and his unlimited greatness. And the natural consequence is not just gratitude and appreciation and humility. That is the first step. But eventually, the devotees who understand the Lord's glories, they fall in love with him. Oh, how sweet, how beautiful. Because God is not just great, God is also so sweet, so beautiful, so charming. such a deep, loving friend and well-wisher. Those who understand this intimate personal qualities of the Lord develop deep personal attachment to Him, not just an awe of greatness, of His potency and grandeur. That is the residents of Vrindavan. They just love Him for how wonderful and sweet He is. So Brahmaji was given a glimpse of all these things and he realized that greatness and he's prayed very beautifully. And he requests the Lord, let me always never deviate from this understanding. That is the prayer that the devotees always have. And then he gets to the task of creation. So Viduraji at the beginning of this chapter asks Maitreya Muni, after having heard this conversation up to this point, he says, please, oh Maitreya, please tell me, the Pitamaha, Brahma, who's the great grandfather of this whole cosmic manifestation, after this point, how did he actually go about creating? Because now he must have got into creating the various living beings, the various planetary systems. And he created all this from his own body. Yes, because he did not have, he did not create from, he didn't go to a chemistry laboratory and bring some chemicals and start mixing them in test tubes. He produced them from his potency. So he was fully equipped with a body and mind that could practically, mystically create species. So please explain all this, O Maitreya Rishi. So Maitreya Rishi was very happy. He had actually all the information ready, but when he saw Vidura so excited to learn more, he got excited to speak. And he starts explaining. Now, some of the explanation he gives in the next few verses actually is something which is a recap of what has happened earlier already. So it may sound familiar to you, but it is mentioned in the verses. He says, "O Vidura, Brahmaji, as instructed by the Lord had instructed two things to him. If you want to create perfectly and you always want to remain Krishna conscious, you never want to be forgetful, you never want to be proud, you never want to deviate from the instructions of the Vedas. The formula is two things, tapa and vidya. Yes. Vidya means spiritual knowledge, spiritual connection, and tapa means to follow a disciplined, austere life which is conducive to spiritual advancement. Even for all of us sadhakas, these two principles are very important. All the positive processes of Krishna consciousness are of the nature of Vidya, because Vidya represents the spiritual potency. So Brahmaji performed tapa and focused on Vidya, and for 100 celestial years, he meditated as instructed and advised by the Lord himself. So this meditation is not just the ordinary meditation of the yogis just for some spiritual knowledge, but this is a devotional absorption. This is bhakti of Brahma. It is not just some Ashtanga yoga. Brahma at that point had already realized his Swarupa. He has developed love for the Lord. He was absorbed in meditation on the transcendental form of the Lord with love and devotion and with a service attitude. So after having performed the tapasya, Brahmaji was given the necessary knowledge and potency. Brahmaji could see that the very lotus flower on which he was born, if you recollect, this lotus flower which was manifested was described as the collective form of the various living entities that are sent to this universe along with all their karma. So it is said that lotus started growing in size until it spread all over the universe. As this was happening, Brahmaji, who was seated within the whorl of the lotus, he started contemplating on how should I go about creating this whole universe. Because there are two steps in creation, right? From Brahma's perspective. One is he wanted to create the various planetary systems first. And then he wanted to populate all those planetary systems with living entities suitable for those planetary systems. Correct? For example, if you create a water body lake, you have to populate it with fishes. You cannot put human beings inside the lake. Yeah. You create land, then you have to put living entities of the which are suitable to stay on land. If it's the sky, then you have to create living entities suitable for the sky. So Brahmaji was contemplating on how to organize the universe into different categories of existences suitable for different categories of living entities. At this point, it is said Brahmaji conceived about how to go about organizing the universe. So what he did is, first, he conceived of dividing the universal planets into three broad categories. What are those three broad categories? Three broad categories are the upper planetary system, Urdhva the higher planets, the middle planetary systems, and the third, the lower planetary systems, Adholok, Uttamalok, and Madhyalok. Higher planetary systems, lower planetary systems, and middle planetary systems. We conceived like this. And then he divided these three categories into actually 14 categories of planetary systems. So this 14 categories is very famous. Most of you must have heard this universe has 14 planetary systems. Chauda Bhuvan, 14 planetary, not planets, 14 kinds of realms, each characterized by a particular kind of living conditions, a particular kind of consciousness, a particular category of living entities. And within each of those realms, there are many planets spread across various parts. So obviously, for example, the Earth is in the middle planetary system, Bhuvarlok. But it is not that Earth is the only planet within the Bhuvarlok, within the Bhulok, Bhumandal, not Bhuva. Bhuva is another one, just one above the Earth. Bhulok, within Bhulok, there are 7 subplanetary systems. There are many dvipas which are described. And these descriptions of these dvipas and how the Bhumandal is organized is given in great detail in the Bhagavad, the subsequent chapters. So I'm not going to go into that now. Yeah. But just so that you understand, these 3 broad categories are divided into 14 planetary systems. Yeah. So what are the 14 planetary systems? In the middle is the Earth, Bhu. Higher than the Bhu is Bhuvaha, Bhuvarlok, and then is Swargalok. So Bhuvarlok refers to the realm between the heavens and the earth. And there are certain kind of celestial or semi-celestial beings who reside in that space. This is basically some of the regions above the earth, but not quite in the heavens. But there is something even beyond the Swargaloka. Swarga is only 2 levels above the earth. There are many planetary systems which are higher even than Swargaloka. So what are they? After Bhu, Bhuvaha, Swaha, then Maharloka, then Janarloka, then Tapoloka, and the highest planet is Satyaloka or Brahmaloka. And beyond the Swargaloka, all these higher planetary systems, as you go higher, these are planets of increasing subtlety, increasing wisdom, increasing austerity, increase of realization. Up to the point that Brahmaloka is such a subtle realm that the living entities there are almost fully free from material infection. They are always absorbed in transcendental consciousness, headed by Lord Brahma. Tapolok is the planet of those who are extremely austere and very advanced in spiritual realization. So there are various prominent sages and they are explained in some of the further chapters. I'm not going to go into detail of the examples of living entities here, but there's a brief mention in this chapter that Brahmaji conceived and organized the universe into 14 such divisions in the stem of the lotus flower. So we spoke of the higher planets above the middle, which is the Bhu. So the higher again is Bhuva, Swa, Mahar, Janar, Tapo, Satya. Also on the other side, there are 7 lower planetary systems. So how are they sequenced? Again in the order below the earth. Below the earth is Atala. Below that is Vitala. Then Sutala. Then Talatala, Mahatala, Rasatala, and Patal. So all of us are familiar with the word Patal. We have heard that many times. Why Patal is invoked so often? Because Patal is the lowest. When somebody goes in the lowest state, said, oh, Patal Lok, he deserves to go to the Patal. It's the lowest possible realm in terms of materialistic tendencies. Now, mind you, these lower planets are not the same as hell. Hell is lower than the lowest planet also. So all this is also described in subsequent cantos of the Bhagavad. So I'm not going to go into that. Just suffice for you to understand that these are all planetary systems populated by different types of living entities. Some are semi-celestial, some are pious, some are materialistic but celestial, various categories. And we will discuss some of those categories later in the subsequent verses. And these are all inhabited, just like on Earth, we are staying here. There are other planets populated by other living entities. So in modern terminology, we would call all these other planets and their residents as aliens. Yeah. We call aliens because we don't know what exists according to modern science. But actually, scriptures are very clear. There are 14 planetary systems, each with so many planets. 14 broad combinations. And we are right in the middle. So we may think, oh, it would have been so nice if I was in the higher ones. But actually, the scriptures say that we are very, very fortunate to be in the middle one. Because even though the middle planetary system, the Bhuloka, may not have the level of comfort and opulence like some of the higher, or even like some of the lower. In fact, some of the lower planets are also called as Bilaswarga. In fact, they are extremely opulent, even more opulent than the earth, but they are extremely materialistic and demoniac. Anyway, that's a topic for another day's discussion. But the point is, the earth is extremely suitable for those who want to make spiritual progress. Within all the 14 planetary systems, the scriptures again and again say that there is no planet as suited for spiritual advancement as Earth. Because Earth, the balance of suffering and enjoyment is just nice to allow the living entities to reflect sufficiently deeply on the mysteries of existence, on who they are and how they can get out of the entanglement of material life. Earth is a very sobering place. Swarga is a very intoxicating place. Lower planets are intoxicating also and very strong mode of passion and ignorance. Swarga has sattva guna, but it is intoxicating in a different way with a false sense of material enjoyment, so much so that it distracts one from the real goal of life. So for devatas, it becomes very difficult to focus on spiritual life. They're always in a party mood, devatas. Earth is a sober place. In Earth, you can sit down and reflect. So Earth is very, very special. So do not think that we are actually not in a wonderful situation. We are, in fact, in a very wonderful situation. So that's what Brahma did. He first entered into the whole. He divided the universe into 3 parts and then into 14 parts. And Brahma could understand with the spiritual knowledge that now he needs to create different living entities based on the different conditions. At this point, actually, Vidura asks a question to Maitreya. He says, Maitreya, you were mentioning in the previous chapters about time and the time factor. Please also describe something about time. Because the time is a manifestation of the Supreme Lord. What are the symptoms of the eternal time? Please describe that also in detail. So he somehow brings that question also because he wants to make sure that Maitreya doesn't forget to answer that question. Actually, Maitreya Muni answers this question about time in great detail in the next chapter. But because Viduraji brings this point suddenly into the conversation, very briefly, Maitreya Muni answers that question in this chapter by saying, by explaining a few characteristics of time and explaining 3 kinds of destruction which happen by the influence of the time energy. So I'm going to briefly describe there and then we continue the answer to the original question. So this whole material manifestation actually becomes possible by the energy of the Lord in the form of time or kala. Because unless time is there, how can material interaction happen? Otherwise, everything will be static. No change. Change means time. In the eternal world, time doesn't exist in the same way because nothing goes through decay, nothing goes through birth, growth, dwindling, and perishment. And this time is so subtle, it is practically nirvishesh, it is practically attributeless. Its influence is seen in terms of how it brings about changes in this world and ultimately takes everything towards destruction. And this time is the impersonal aspect of the Lord, Avyakta Murtina. So then, Maitreya Muni explains that time in this world can also be perceived in the form of 3 levels of destruction. He says that one kind of destruction happens, which is known as the type of guna destruction. There's destruction of the type of guna, destruction called dravya, and destruction which is known as kala. 3 types. What is the difference? Time in the form of guna is that influence of time which is because of one's own action. It brings about karma on us and ultimately leads to the destruction of our own body. Then, at a higher level, time is seen and perceived in terms of the duration of Brahma's day. Because Brahma wakes up, manages to recreate, so many things happen, and then at the end of Brahma's day, one level of destruction happens. Whether it's because of the fire of Sankarshan, flood, so many different ways, destruction happens. This is at the end of every day of Brahma. This is known as Dravya destruction. It is essentially due to the material elements. And then the most massive influence of time or kala is seen when practically the entire material manifestation is wound up and practically time itself is suspended by the Lord. And the whole material manifestation again becomes unmanifest. That happens at the end of the lifetime of Brahma. Every 311 trillion years. That is the gigantic, massive, the most massive influence of time. Of course, we cannot even conceive it. Actually, these things are at such a scale It is practically impossible for us to even imagine. Do you know it is so hard for us to imagine? We talk of so many big, big things. It is even hard for us. I'm sitting in Kuala Lumpur right now. For me, even to imagine how big the city is, I cannot conceive it in my mind. I just try. You cannot conceive of the size of the city within your mind. You cannot. What to speak of the country? What to speak of the planet? What to speak of the planetary system and the universe and the whole cosmic manifestation? And what to speak of that which is beyond? Our capacity is actually so small. Anyway, so this explanation of time is given by Vidura, by Maitreya Muni to Vidura as a quick synopsis by giving a few attributes of time and how it is so critical for the manifestation of this world. Then Brahmaji, actually Maitreya Muni, goes on to explaining how Brahma recreated the cosmic manifestation at the beginning of his day. So the broad explanation, the way it is given is that actually material creation happens in 10 steps. It's a 10-step activity. Out of these 10 steps, the first 6 steps are part of Sarga or primary creation. Primary creation includes the manifestation of the Mahat Tattva, then followed by manifestation of Ahankar or the false ego. Then the third step being the manifestation of the Tanmatras or the sense objects, then the manifestation of the senses, then the manifestation of those deities or devatas who are in charge of these various senses, and then the manifestation of tamas or ignorance, which produces the material false ego, which produces avidya for the living entities, and which makes the living entities identify themselves with the material body. So there are 6 steps like this, and all these 6 steps have been discussed in detail in the earlier chapters for those who have studied and those who are able to recollect what we have discussed earlier. And in these 6 steps are actually transformations of material energy which are happening, pushed and activated by the Lord himself. So the Lord, through these 6 steps, is doing what is known as the primary creation. Brahmaji has not even come into the picture for these 6 steps. Brahmaji gets manifested after these 6 steps. Because even when Brahmaji is manifested, he has senses already, right? He already has eyes, ears. So that means the primary elements are there. That means the senses are there. The sense objects are there. The sense devatas are there. Correct? That's only when Brahma's body is created. Otherwise, how can Brahma's body be created unless all these things are in place? So primary creation of all these building components of the universe has already happened. And then Brahma, after the 6 steps, gets created. And then Brahma is given knowledge by the Lord, like what we discussed, on how he can continue creation now. From this point onwards, to actually organize the universe, create the various planets, and populate it with living entities. So 4 more steps of the creation are carried on by Lord Brahma. So all these steps are briefly explained in this chapter. So the first 6 steps I briefly summarized, and they are all done by the Lord himself. Then there are 4 additional steps which Brahmaji himself does after, through tapa and vidya, he gets all this knowledge. And that description of what he does as a part of those 4 steps is covered from verse 18 onwards. So Brahma was blessed with the power of creation, the mode of passion. Of course, he was not infected by passion because he had prayed and he had received that blessing from the Lord that he will not be influenced by passion, even though he is engaged in activity which is of the nature of passion. That is the special blessing, right? And that's the special blessing we all want. How we can be engaged in everything in this world but still be unaffected. Yes. And what is the secret? Detachment from trying to enjoy and doing it as a in the spirit of service as a yajna for the Supreme Lord. Yes, that is the simple formula. And to remain always, to be able to follow that formula, tapa and vidya are very important. So Brahma has set a very nice example for all of us to follow. That's why he's the first guru. So what Brahmaji did is in the seventh step of creation, Brahmaji started, after he had created the various planetary systems, he started by creating living entities. The first category of living entities he created are the immovable living entities. Sthavara. Sthavara means stationary, those who don't move. Who are they? Especially the trees and the vegetation. Yes, to start with. So these were manifested first. And within them, the Bhagavad describes what are the characteristics of these trees. This kind of living entities. The characteristics of these kind of living entities is that the consciousness is very low. In fact, their consciousness is so low that it is not even evident that they are conscious. Of course, we know trees are living because they are growing and so many things are happening. But it's not so evident that they are alive, right? Because they don't respond in a way that we would expect most conscious living entities to respond. That's why the scriptures say, the Bhagavatam says, their consciousness is not evident. And while it is not evident, the reality is that they do feel pain. The scriptures say plants feel pain. Actually, modern science, until not very long ago, was a bit unsure about whether plants are able to feel, until an Indian scientist proved with proper scientific testing that yes, plants do feel hurt. When you pluck a leaf, when you break a branch, they feel pain. So he has actually measured their pain feeling. This is very interesting. But the scriptures always said, yes, plants feel pain. Correct? That's why it is said, even when we pluck tulasi leaves to offer to the Lord, we have to do it very gently. We cannot just pull it out very gently by requesting her and praying. There is actually a mantra for plucking the leaf from a tulsi plant by requesting her grace. Chinomi Keshava Priya. Oh Tulsi, I am taking your leaf used in Krishna's service. So plants feel pain. So they, even though the consciousness manifested is very low, they are still conscious and they can experience. And there are unlimited varieties of these trees, and a few kinds of varieties are mentioned. Some are like creepers. Some are strong trees with strong trunks who stand on their own. Some are like hollow pipes, like the bamboos. Some are trees which produce fruits, but not flowers. And some are trees which produce flowers, which eventually get converted to fruits. The Bhagavatam mentions these various kind of trees known as Drumaha, Virudhaha, Twaksara, Lata, Oshadhayaha, and Vanaspatayaha. 6 types of immovable plants. So this is the 6th type of creation. Sorry, the 7th type of creation. In the 8th type of creation which Brahmaji does to populate the living entities, he creates the various lower species, the animals. For the plants, their nourishment is upwards. For the animals, it is said the nourishment is horizontal. One peculiar characteristic of the animals is mentioned here is, while the animals are a bit more conscious, definitely, and the symptoms of life are seen more evidently within the animals, they're moving around, they're responding, they will respond if you try to attack them, unlike trees. But nonetheless, the animals they're not evolved enough to properly deliberate on deeper, more important and substantial activities. All their deliberation is limited to eating, sleeping, mating, defending. That they are very intelligent, even more intelligent than us. How to find food, very intelligent. Yes, they are not affected by movement control order, COVID, nothing. Eating, sleeping, mating, defending. Human beings cannot beat the animals. But when it comes to reflection on the truth of life, on the reality and the purpose of our existence, animals fail miserably. They are unable to deliberate. In fact, they don't have a concept of future. The animals are so absorbed in just enjoying the senses now. And that is why those human beings who are simply absorbed in enjoying the senses now are compared to animals. आहार निद्रा भयमैथुनम च सामान्यम एतत् पशुभिः नराणाम धर्मो हि तेषाम अधिको विशेषः धर्मेण हीन पशुभिः समानः. If there is no higher inquiry, the human beings are as good as animals. They are doing exactly the same things. Eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. And they generally understand their needs. They're strongly driven by one sense. What is that sense which animals are most driven by? The sense of smell. Everything they want to smell. They meet somebody also, they want to smell. Food, anything. Before touching, they will want to smell. It's so driven by smell. So that is one of the characteristics of the animals. And there are said to be 28 types of animals. I do not know all those 28 types. There are a few types which are mentioned in this chapter. Maybe all the 28 are mentioned somewhere else. There are some animals who have a foot with 2 hooves. There are some who have a foot with only 1 hoof. Some animals have 5 claws or 5 fingers. And then there are also other kind of lower species in this category, which are slightly different, which are birds as well as aquatics. So all these species, animals, birds, aquatics, these are all created as part of creation number 8. And then in creation number 9 comes the human beings. Now the consciousness is even more developed. But generally, most human beings, they're so passionate because most of them are not just thinking about now, they have a higher ability to think. But most of them, because of their ability to think, are always trying to chase for something, to attain something, to get something. And because they're so passionate, because they're so dedicated to working hard, always hankering and lamenting, but actually most of the human beings, especially those who are not in spiritual knowledge, actually they're always suffering. But they think they are very happy. This is what the Bhagavad says. They're actually suffering, but they think they are happy. So these are the primary characteristics of the human beings. Of course, the Bhagavatam across all the various categories earlier, it also mentions various species also. So I'm not going into that. For example, amongst the animals who have 5 toes, animals like dog, jackal, tiger, fox, cat, rabbit, lion, monkey, elephant, tortoise, etc. These are all mentioned. And for other categories also, birds, some animals are mentioned. For those who have hoofs, also various examples are mentioned. But anyway, that is not very important for this discussion. So the 9th category was human beings. And where were the human beings created? In the middle planetary system. And then the last 10th creation which Brahmaji did was the various kind of celestial species. And broadly call them as demigods. They are also called as the Vaikrita creations. The first 6 steps are known as Prakrita creations, and the next 4 steps are known as the Vaikrit creation. In fact, the Kumaras who are manifested from the Lord are in between. They are both the Prakrit and the Vaikrit, because as soon as Brahma gets knowledge, the Kumaras come out from his mind and they are created. So the Lord is also involved in their creation from a Prakrit perspective, and also because they come from Brahma, they are also called Vaikrit. So they are the only category which is common. But all creation before that is Prakrit, through the material energy, without Brahma's involvement, under the directions of the Lord directly, and then the Vaikrita, which is under the supervision and guidance of Brahmaji. So the devatas who get created as the 10th step in creation. By the way, if you remember, there were also certain devatas who were created earlier. Yes, and those devatas are different from these devatas. What is the difference? The devatas which were created earlier were only the deities who were the controllers of the various senses. No other devatas were created. But now Brahmaji is creating devatas to populate the 14 planetary systems. The devatas for the senses are already existing. They predate even Brahma's creation. The other devatas, who are they? There are 8 categories of the devatas. So they are briefly mentioned. I'll not go into details, but I'll just briefly mention. The devatas of the Swargaloka, who are also known as the Vibhudas. Then the Pitris or the forefathers is another category. The Asur or the demons who populate the lower planetary systems is the third category. The Gandharvas and Apsaras who either stay in Swargaloka or a plane just below the Swarga. The Yakshas and the Rakshasas. The Yakshas are also in the realm between the earth and Swarga. Now, each of these species has very peculiar characteristics. We do not have time to discuss, but Gandharvas have very peculiar characteristics. Yakshas have very peculiar characteristics. Yakshas have very peculiar nature. Never get into a problem with a Yaksha. They are extremely powerful, and then they don't hesitate one bit to kill somebody. A Yaksha or Yakshini never get in their way. So these Yakshas are actually associates of Kuvera. Anyway, we'll not get into that topic. That's a very broad topic with a lot of different things. But essentially, the Yakshas and the Yakshinis are in the realm between the earth and the Swarga. And they're very, very powerful with lot of powers which we will call as supernatural. So be careful. Some people, why I'm saying be careful is because some people try to interact with the Yakshas and the Yakshinis and try to get some favors from them through some rituals and ceremonies. Some of them get into massive mess because they cannot handle it. Then the Gandharvas, Apsaras, we discuss Yakshas and Rakshasas. Then there are another categories, the Siddhas, the Charanas, and the Vidyadharas. It's another category of celestial beings. Also, you can call them as demigods. All these species are lower than the Devatas of Swarga. Then there are the Bhutas and the Pretas and the Pishachas. These are the actual ghostly species. These are more dangerous than the Yakshas and Yakshinis. Yakshas, Yakshinis, you can actually have a decent conversation as long as you don't cross their path and get into trouble. But these are actually, Yakshas, Yakshinis are deeply into the mode of passion. But these Bhutas, Pretas and Pishachas, they are deeply in the mode of ignorance. Stay away from them. They are also hovering in the Antariksha. Antariksha means the space between the earth and the Bhuvarlok. There is Bhu, Bhuva and Swa. But between the Bhu and the Bhuva is the Antariksha. And within that Antariksha, these bhutas and the pretas, these ghosts, hobgoblins, and the pishachas. Each of these categories have its own meaning and its own peculiar existence. But again, we don't have time for that. We'll not go into that. And then the last category is the eighth category of these celestial beings are called as Kinnaras, Kimpurushas, and others. These are beings, Kinnara and Kimpurusha are almost human-like beings, but they don't are their features are not exactly like humans. They are almost humanoid. That's why they are called Kinnara. Kinnara means Kim Nara. Is he actually a man? Or Kim Purusha? Is it actually a human being? It's a little bit like human being, but is not. So there are certain species like this. They also have certain powers which human beings generally don't have. Okay. So the Vibhudas, the Pitris, the Asuras, the Gandharva and Apsaras, the Yakshas, Rakshasas, the Siddha Charana, Vidyadharas, the Bhuta, Preta, Pishachas, and the last Kinnaras and Kimpurushas. All of these are created by Lord Brahma, and they are given various residences across the 14 planetary systems. And the last verse of this chapter, Maitreya Muni tells that now that I've described these 10 steps of creation briefly, now I will go into the interesting topic of the descendants of the Manus. So Brahmaji created all this, but a lot of interesting things happen from descendants of Manu. Yeah, because from there the various great kings come, ruled over these various planetary systems, and they all have many wonderful, beautiful stories and pastimes from which we can learn so much. And within those pastimes and stories, the Lord has appeared in many incarnations, and those are all very beautiful, interesting topics for you to discuss. And Yudharaji, you wanted to hear about the Lord and his pastime, so I'm headed in that direction. I've given the background of creation. Now I'm going into Manvantarani, correct? The Bhagavatam, one of the topics is, first is Sarga, Visarga, primary and secondary creation, which has been described. Now it is going into Manvantara. And then it will go into Ishanukatha. And of course, there are so many other topics, Nirodha, and a few others as well. Okay, so that brings us to the end of this particular chapter, chapter 10. Thank you very much. Granthara Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Any questions?
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Yes, Amit. Hare Krishna.
Two questions, Prabhuji. So one, this process of creation and the structure of the universe, is this relevant only for our universe or all the millions and billions of universes in the material world? That was the first question. The second question is, whenever the Lord appears, whenever he appears in all the universes, he appears always only on the Earth planet, or does he appear in the lower and upper planetary systems also?
So the answer to the first question is yes. While the various universes are different in sizes, the basic principles across the universes are still the same. The only thing is, based on the size of the universe, the Brahmas in the different universes may be more and more powerful. So like what it is described in some universes, the Brahma, instead of having 4 heads, has 8 heads. So instead of quad processor, they have an octo processor. Nowadays, computers have quad processors because the olden single processor was not good enough. So our Brahma has quad processor. He has 4 heads. I do not know what head produces what processing, but he's very, very intelligent. In fact, it is said in this chapter, it says Brahma's, from a creation perspective, Brahma's knowledge and capability is as good as Krishna's, by Krishna's blessings. It's very extraordinary. So But there are some universes which are so complex and so huge, and the power that is needed to manage them is so much more that some of these Brahmas have 8 heads. Some have 16 heads. Yes. Some have 32, some have 64, some have 100, some have 1000, some have 10,000. So now you will already start spinning. How can there be 10,000 heads? You don't worry about it. You don't have to create it. Krishna knows how to design. So let us not worry about how it will fit, how it will look beautiful. That is Krishna's design department. He's the best UI UX expert in all existence. So let us not worry about that. But the point is that yes, Brahma may be more powerful, but the general concept of 14 planetary systems, the concept of time, karma, all these other things, species, 8.4 million species, right? All these things are same across the various universes. Yeah. And as far as we know, the lifespan of all the universes also is the same, because as Lord Mahavishnu breathes out, 311 trillion years is the lifespan of all the universes. It's just that some of the universes may be smaller, some are bigger. So maybe the number of living entities in different universes may be different. So that was point number 1. And the second question is, where in the universe does the Lord appear? Actually, the Lord appears in all kinds of places. That's why the incarnations of the Lord is said to be unlimited, like the waves of the ocean. We know only a few. And it is not that all the incarnations, even that we know, are all born or all appeared on earth. For example, the incarnation of Lord Vamana as Upendra is born as the son of Aditi. Yes. So that is not here. Nor is the Kurma avatar born on earth. Yes.
Sorry, Prabhuji, my question was, his appearance in his original form as Lord Krishna. Does that happen only on earth, or does that happen in the
you're
other
asking
planets?
specifically about Krishna.
Yes.
Yes, specifically about Krishna, yes, it happens always on earth. It happens always on earth. Of course, even when Krishna appeared, he traveled for specific pastimes to some other planets in the universe also. But the manifestation of Vrindavan and the Braj Leela, Vrindavan, Mathura, Dwarka, happens always on the earth planet.
Okay, thank you, Prabhuji.
So in each of the universe, there will be a Bhulok, and within that Bhumandal, there will be an earth-like planet. Whatever the name may be there, I do not know whether it will be called by the same name. So there will be something equivalent of a Bharatvarsha. What is Bharatvarsha? That area or that tract of land where the light of spiritual knowledge shines and drives everything. Bha means illumination. Rata, where the people are engaged and pursuing the light of spiritual knowledge. That is Bharata. So on each of those planets, there will be an equivalent place. Whether it's exactly called Bharat or something else, I do not know. Maybe even the name may be same. I do not know. But yes, but it is in the middle planets, and Krishna appears in the middle planetary systems in Vrindavan. Of course, when Krishna appears, his abode doesn't belong to Bhulok. His abode comes from the spiritual world and is manifest within this world. His abode, the spiritual Vrindavan, the spiritual Dwarka, the spiritual Mathura, appears in the world but is not of the world. It doesn't belong to Bhulok or even this material world. It is actually a replica from the spiritual world, but it is covered over by the Yogamaya potency. Did I answer your question?
Yes, Prabhuji. Yes, Prabhuji. Thank you.
Thank you, Amit. Anything else?
Yes, Prabhu, just want to get a clarification.
Yeah.
Just now you mentioned something about the Yaksha. Did you say Kubera?
Yes.
Can I just ask you to repeat again, Prabhu, that part?
No, I said the Yakshas are actually associates The Yakshas are ruled over by Kuvera. Kuvera is their king.
Uh-huh.
He is Yaksharaj.
Can I ask you another related question? Because
Yeah.
I came to hear, I don't know how far it's true. Kubera is like the god that the Chinese pray to in what I've been told. I'm not sure. So, and it's also a tendency for Chinese to have like this kind of what we call here like a tokong, a small prayer place. So, are
Hmm.
they actually praying to yakshas? Do you know?
I do not know. Maybe, but I know that I cannot say I know that. I have heard that uh, many of the deities that they pray to are deities which are below Swarga and higher than earth. So within that realm, so it is possible that they may belong to this category of the Yakshas, Siddhas, Vidyadharas, Charanas. Quite possible, but I do not know for sure.
Thank you, Prabhu.
It is much more easier for living entities like humans to interact with these species much easier than the Devatas. The Devatas are much higher. Yeah, so there are many people who, even within this world, have done certain sadhanas to access and get into contact with these uh, living entities who are between the earth and the heavens, and they actually seek favors from them. Ultimately, like the Bhagavad Gita says, all these are all material things. There's nothing religious or spiritual about this. Ultimately, we are not interested in worshipping anybody for material benefits. Even if we want material benefits, Krishna recommends in the Bhagavad Gita that one should worship him because he is the ultimate giver of all benedictions. One doesn't need to approach or worship any other living entity. Anything else from anyone? Yes, Sudhir Sundar Prabhu. This is something.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. Just
Hare
to share and what is that analogy of what is it humility, it should be like the sun. As it goes higher, it becomes smaller. So I kind of heard this somewhere. So I thought it was
Hmm.
a very good analogy because basically when the sun appears, it is big. As it goes higher and higher, it becomes smaller. So I thought it's
Hmm.
something good to remember. I mean, when it comes to humility. Thank you, bro.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, yeah. Another beautiful example the Bhagavad gives with respect to humility. The Bhagavatam says, those trees who do not have any fruits, they stand tall with all the branches going upwards. But those trees which are full of ripe, laden with fruits, because of the weight of those fruits, they bow down. So those living entities who are full of knowledge, fruits of knowledge, of wisdom, they are bowing down. Where those who have nothing, they just try to stand tall. Oh, I am. Those who actually have fruits of knowledge, they realize, yes. Even the greatness that I have, they don't think that everything I have is useless. They know that whatever I have, it's actually the gift of the Lord. It doesn't belong to me. Many people actually misunderstand humility to be inferiority complex. No, humility is not inferiority complex. Humility means to understand that whatever we have, even though it may be wonderful and special, we are not the proprietor of all those opulences and those abilities, those opulences are coming from the Lord. And in front of the greatness of the Lord, all these are small and insignificant. Correct? Huh? Correct? When the sun is shining in the sky, the scriptures give an example. The sun is shining in the sky. you go out on the street and take a lamp with you, a ghee lamp, the wick, light it and go back, go out on the street and try to show some light outside on the street using a lamp. What is, people will laugh at you. How can, you show a lamp to the sun? What light is the lamp going to do in front of the light of the sun? So all our abilities are so small, and the lamp and the light of the lamp is also coming from the sun ultimately. But in front of the sun, it is nothing. You understand? So those who become truly knowledgeable are able to understand this principle well. So they understand, yes, I have abilities. Yes, I may have some extraordinary gift, but all those gifts are from God and should be used for His service. And in front of God, they are insignificant. But I will, as long as they are with me and given to me as gifts, I will use them in His service. That is the understanding. So that is the proper mood of humility. Not just saying that, oh, I don't have anything, I am no good, I'm stupid, I'm ugly. That is not what is humility. Okay, I hope that helps. Anything else? You can see a very humble devotee. I can see Santanam Prabhu, very humble. Santanam Prabhu is especially blessed with humility. Hari Hari.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji.
Hari Bo. And those who are humble actually are able to experience the bliss of devotion. If you are in a mood of pride, if you are in a mood of an enjoyer, the taste of Krishna consciousness we will not be able to taste. That is the reality. No matter what you do, without developing proper humility, one cannot taste the nectar of devotion. I'm not saying, I'm just repeating what all the great souls say, but I can, by the Lord's blessing, at least understand this is such an important principle. Okay, if nothing else, we will end here. Sorry, almost 10:20. So slightly late. So after the class is over, if you are getting, late for, as I'm going on in the question and answers, you can drop off like some of them have dropped. But I leave it to you. So thank you all very much. Granthara Srimad Bhagavatam ki Jai, Srila Prabhupada ki Jai, Samaveta Gaura Bhakta ki Jai.